Hello, viewers. My name is Andrew Dean. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at Lakehead University, and I bring you another edition of Research Matters. She's an academic, a researcher, and a senior administrator. Dear viewers, please join me in welcoming Dr. Vicki Kristman, an Ontario Research Chair in Injury and Disabilities Prevention. She's also Professor, Department of Health Sciences at Lakehead University, and Director and Senior Scientist at the Enhancing and Prevention of Injury and Disability at Work Research Institute, or what we just like to call EPI at Work. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you, Andy.
So, Vicki, you've worked extensively in the area of community-based primary health care with a focus on preventing work disability through accommodation. Could you maybe elaborate on some of your research interests and what are your current areas of research?
Sure. So a lot of my research interests actually started around physical ailments, physical injury and disability in the workplace, from the time I was a postdoc to when I came to Lakehead back in 2011. And shortly after I arrived here, I was approached by Margaret Chernikoi from the Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. And she had read some work that I had done that was published, an OLE publication through the Institute for Work and Health, and said, "This is great work, but we need you to focus on mental health here." And she said, "We have big issues here in the Northwest with mental health in our workplaces." So I said, "Okay, let's write a grant and do it." So we basically did that. We obtained funding from the Manitoba Workers' Compensation Board, drafted a project, conducted it, and then it just sort of expanded from that. Margaret introduced me to Audrey Gilbeau, you'll meet later in this session. And we've developed a partnership there. So really it's been partnerships developing within Northwestern Ontario to really build, now we have a research institute at work.
Excellent, okay. You know, I mean, as you said, this is called Research Matters. You kind of hit on it a little bit, but why does this research matter to you and to Northwestern Ontario?
Well, people spend a big chunk of their lives at work, and I do think that we want to make sure that we're going to a healthy and safe work environment. I know this is really important to Northwestern Ontario, not only because anecdotally, Margaret's approached me, but we've actually done some studies. I did a study with Sonia Centenar way back a few years ago, and she we conducted some work using WSIB data to compare disability duration in Northern and Southern Ontario. And we actually found that disability durations were extended or lengthened in Northern Ontario, Northwestern Ontario. So it seems, for some, we don't know the exact reasons yet, although we can hypothesize and take some educated guesses as to why duration of disability lasts longer in Northwestern Ontario. It's definitely an area that we need to focus on. So that's hence the reason for the Institute, gives us an opportunity to focus on these areas, try to make work as healthy and safe as possible. And that includes not just physical injuries, but also psychological.
Excellent. And personally, what is your role in the research framework? I mean, I know you're the director of the Institute and multifaceted, but how do you fit into this?
Well, I design a lot of the research studies, so I'm a principal investigator on a number of different projects. I supervise a number of students, and I work with partnerships. We really want to work with community. That's the goal of the Institute, is we can, as researchers, we can identify research questions that are basically gaps in the literature where we don't know the answer to certain questions. But part of that is because maybe those questions aren't that important and no one really cares. But if you work with community and you work with partners, then they tell you what the important questions are, what they want to know, and what will be used, what's important. So we work with community partners to do exactly that, make sure that the research that we conduct is relevant to our stakeholders to ensure that it will get used and it will help to improve health and wellness in our workplaces.
Excellent. I know your work is very much qualitative work, a lot of asking of questions, surveys, follow-ups, and sometimes those timelines are longer than other timelines. Tell us a little bit about the qualitative type work or research that goes into your projects.
Yeah, so we do both quantitative and qualitative work. My background is an epidemiologist, so that's why I tend to focus more on the quantitative component. But we do a lot of work, and actually a lot of qualitative work. And in fact, within the Department of Health Sciences, where a lot of our students arise from, that's the department I'm currently focused in or affiliated with. We actually teach students to learn both quantitative and qualitative because there's an opportunity to enhance research by using both, because really understand a problem from multiple perspectives. And often we find that the qualitative components will do some explaining, will explain what we're seeing with the quantitative numbers. So we try to really combine the two to better understand the issues that we're dealing with.
Excellent, okay. So we all know that research costs money. Now you've got students to train, infrastructure to build, traveling, etc. Can you give some of the ideas of where you've had success in funding projects and who are the funders of these projects?
Sure. So yeah, I did mention the Manitoba Workers' Compensation Board. So they funded some of the projects around understanding accommodations related to mental health issues in the workplace. We've also had funding with the Nokiwin Tribal Council as a partner, both with SSHRC, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and also CHR, Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Those projects were primarily, first, SSHRC funds most social issues, trying to understand what work means to the Indigenous population. That was the focus of that work. And the most recent with CHR was really, we've done a couple with CHR. One was a mental health hackathon, where the idea was to go and try to take something that existed and hack it into a solution for the problem that we were facing. The problem we were dealing with is bullying in the workplace. And then the most recent grant that we just are wrapping up now with CHR is to understand that app. We developed an app through the hackathon, and what we wanted to try to do is evaluate it to see, well, does it really have an impact on workplace mental health for the communities of the Nokiwin Tribal Council?
And you recently got a very large grant from the ministry as well. Can you want to elaborate a little bit on that, how much it was and
Sure.
what it means?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, this was from the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. This is an operational grant to basically fund the Research Institute so we can continue to do the work that we've been doing, at least started in the past. We should be able to expand on that with this funding, because we are intending to really expand in terms of research assistants, research associates. We have a number of positions open for hire right now. The idea is that we will have 3 streams within the Institute. We're focusing on mental health in the workplace, because as I've already stated, it's an important issue here. We're also focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace, and that's part of where our work with Nokiwin fits, is we want to make sure that opportunities in the workplace are equitable for all. And also the most recent that we're currently right now developing is a knowledge mobilization and implementation division. And that's really to better understand the impact of our research. What are our research findings doing for community? But also to make and further our networks, the networks that we've built with community. We want to expand on those and continue to build. And with just a few bodies in the Institute, that's hard to do. So we're creating this Institute, this component of the Institute, which will allow us to actually reach out and network further than what we've currently been able to do.
So I asked a little bit about timelines before, but with this large grant and with other ones, there must always be milestones that you're hoping to reach along the way. Can you give us some kind of ideas about some of the project timelines that are going forward? Yeah,
so the ministry project for Epidemic Work, we hope that is sustainable for a very, very long time. We have a 5-year award there, so the hope is that, and it's renewable, so we hope to renew that and keep that going. Some of the other projects, the CHR project, as I said, is just coming to an end, but those typically are on the timeline of around 3 years, roughly 2 to 3 years to complete a project like that. We're currently in the process of developing with Nokiwin an opportunity to try to further sort of tweak the app a bit and try to focus it on the youth, on youth within the Nokiwin populations, the communities. And that we're hoping to submit that possibly next fall. We're going to do some pilot work now in the winter and see if the youth would be more likely to access the app than that will be found with the an older population. So roughly, if that comes to fruition, then that would probably be another 2 to 3 year project I would see.
Excellent. So on that note, we're going to take a very short break. Dear viewers, please stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Research Matters. So today we're in conversation with Dr. Vicki Kristman. And in this section of the airing, we're going to be joined by Audrey Gilbeau, Executive Director of Nokiwin Tribal Council. Thank you, Audrey, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So, Audrey, tell us a little bit how this partnership developed. Was it a research idea? Was it a collaborative initiative? What motivated the project?
It actually very interesting, but really quite simply just taking time to meet and have a conversation with Vicki. We were introduced by a colleague, Margaret Cernagoy, who was working at the time with Workplace Prevention Safety Services. And just that simple introduction, sharing some of the work that we were doing. And this was in the early stages, the early days of what we refer to as Gimminamadozamin, which is We Are Living Well. It's our response to building and improving on health and safety culture within our member First Nation communities. And so Vicki and I met, we had a few conversations, and then as we continued to meet and chat, that's where the whole concept of research started to come in. And then there was a really cool opportunity that was introduced to Vicki, and Vicki welcomed Nokiwin, or Gimminamadozamin steering committee in particular, to participate in a hackathon, which was a very unusual opportunity, something I'd never considered, never even heard the concept before. But working through that in order to look at how we could use technology to build and support mental health and mental wellness with members from our member communities was very interesting, intriguing, creative, and innovative. So that was our very first go at this. And as you may recall, we also signed very early on a partnership agreement, which was with Lakehead University, but we also signed that partnership agreement with all health and safety associations in Ontario that were a part of our Gimminamadozamin as well.
Okay, that sounds great. So the hackathon wasn't too foreign at the end of the
It was actually very interesting. It's you felt a little bit like you were in a fishbowl, and you were being supported by all of these fine minds, bright minds, young minds. But it was great in the sense that we were able to also, from a Nokiwin perspective, measure some of the challenges or maybe the unknowns that people from mainstream Toronto were not really familiarized in terms of First Nation communities, the challenges that First Nation communities, some of the history with First Nation communities, but further, just how distant a First Nation community can be separate from like a city like Toronto. Access to technology being just one simple understanding.
You've touched on it briefly, but how do you feel this kind of research and this kind of partnership will benefit your community now and perhaps in the future as well?
Well, you know what? First Nations will be the first to say that they've been researched to, there's words they use. And it's true, there have been a lot of research, more as a collective from a national perspective. And while within that research, there are specifics to territory, maybe some of the history in particular, I think what Lakehead University, and in particular this partnership is doing, it's giving communities the power and the control over the focus of the research. As Vicki mentioned earlier, engaging with the communities becomes really important because when academics, sometimes can get really drilled down into the, academia, which is important for that group of people, but being in a position to break it down, that it becomes meaningful information, and knowing and having the community know the control rests with them at the end of the day, I think is very powerful. One thing that we do know from a health and safety point of view is that there is not a lot of research that's been done with First Nations in particular, let alone within this territory. So we're very excited to be a part of it. There's still so much more to do. The work that Vicki is doing with disability at work is very interesting to us. We talk about the impacts of historical trauma. We've talked about lateral violence, or what's commonly referred to as bullying. But that is really an important conversation, and that's something that regardless of all the other areas within health and safety, that remains the number one area of focus. So the work we're doing with the mental health app, Focusing on youth, I think, is a really good prevention strategy, and really, building that awareness with our youth is really important. I think our youth will be the leaders in turning the page and turning to a more positive chapter in our history.
That sounds wonderful. Now, with every project, there's always some challenges. I mean, the benefits we've heard a lot about, but what were some of the challenges you thought also existed?
I think initially, I know, so one of the things, again, with Lakehead, I appreciated the fact that they went to community. While we did have meetings with our steering committee in Thunder Bay, in terms of meeting with the membership, though, and the citizens from the community, it happened at the community. One I recall, it happened in the school. So bringing the teachers, the educators, who are dealing with stressful situations as well, bringing them into it, engaging with the elders was also very important, but not being so, they didn't select necessarily where the meeting spaces or the engagement sessions took place, and we took advantage of opportunities as the opportunities became available. So I think even one of them happened on the powwow grounds. And recently, we've had engagement on Mount McKay. So just being open to that. The other piece from a challenge point of view, relationships are so important. And it's something that we, with Nokiwin, we really promote, is take the time to get to know people. Forget the work. Let's just talk about being people, who we are, where we come from, what we like to do. Do it around food, that's always a positive. And then start to get into the conversation, but just take the time to get to know people where they're at. Have a sense of a person in their life, and everyone wants that, right?
Excellent. I think Audrey alluded to a bit this, Vicki, but can you maybe throw some lights on the importance of relation building with undertaking community-based research, specifically with Indigenous tribal councils? What's the approach to conduct research, you think, in the best way?
I think it's exactly as Audrey stated, that you need to really build that foundation of trust and really understanding each other, knowing where each other come from. We basically just met and chatted for 2 years, and that's a long time, especially in an academic world where a young professor, for example, is trying to get tenure. They don't necessarily have that type of time. So I think it is vital that you take the time to make those partnerships and build those relationships, because that's really what will launch into the ability to actually do the projects. Because challenges come along the way, but when we know each other, we can face them together, and because we trust each other and we know what we can do. So I do think that is really, really vital.
That's good to hear. Well, we know that good research and good partnerships can't be rushed. They take time to develop, and as you mentioned about Mount McKay, I think research happens everywhere as well. So it's good to have those opportunities to be engaged in all different aspects of research whatsoever. And I know you both won a prize from Lakehead University with regards to the partnership. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was actually very unexpected, surprising. But really, I think for us, we were proud to have been recognized as, with this work. But it was the Indigenous Partnership Award, and I think that speaks to both Lakehead University and the work that Vicki is doing and her approach, and with the work of Nokiwin. And we have this, Nokiwin, we're always open to promoting and supporting partnerships that will help to support, the communities where they're at. And this one, I think, is a really good one. And I like what Vicki said about, we're able to have difficult conversations, but never adversarial. It's always more, how can we support? How can we work together? What can we do better? What can we learn? And we're still learning as well at Nokiwin. Communities are continually changing, responding, and we don't do anything that is cookie cutter in approach, because again, we stop to find out where people are at, where communities are at, listen to them and respond and support.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Audrey, for being with us today, and thank you for this partnership. We're really excited about the project. So on that promising note, we're going to take another break. Welcome back, viewers. In this edition of Research Matters, we're listening to Dr. Vicki Kristman and about her research projects. We also met with one of her research partners, Audrey Gilbeau, Executive Director of Nokiwin Tribal Council. So in this final section, I'm delighted to meet a young researcher, Polson, Dr. Vicki's PhD student. So Kara, what's your research work? What is your PhD topic, and how far along are you in your project?
Thank you, Andy. Good questions. My research interests, very broadly speaking, center around the workplace and how that can impact our mental health. Getting a little more specific, I'm really interested in this idea of workplace isolation, which can manifest many ways: bullying or lateral violence in the workplace, lack of organizational support, or something we can all relate to post-pandemic, working from home. And how does that impact our mental health? Does it help our mental health, or does it harm it? How does it impact our productivity and our organizational outcomes? My master's work was a systematic review in this area where I critically examined the literature looking at mental health and working from home. And the conclusions were from that study were that I couldn't make any conclusions because we didn't know enough about it, and there wasn't a large enough body of literature. So my dissertation in the PhD program, while very much still in development, will build upon this area in some capacity.
Excellent. So tell me about your direct involvement in these projects. I mean, these are very much a community-based project, but as a student, how have you been involved?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be exposed to this collaborative partnership with Nokiwin Tribal Council. I've been more in the background. I was working on a large-scale scoping review for the project. So one of the initial projects discovered some findings which identified challenges that are experienced by Nokiwin Tribal Council members that are affecting labor force participation. So things like bullying or lateral violence in the workplace, work-family conflict. So step one in the research process is identifying the problem. And step two is to think of how can we target this problem and how can we implement change. Ultimately, we want to make change. So the scoping review looked at the literature, and we tried to identify any intervention that's ever been done that targets these factors. So we've done that now, and we have a list, and we're going to be presenting them to the communities in a few months. No, next month, actually.
Couple weeks. Yeah.
And because it's a collaboration, we're simply going to be presenting these interventions to our community partners. We don't know which would be most suitable. So we're going to present the findings and take their feedback.
Excellent. So, can you tell us how this partnership has impacted your research journey? Where do you see yourself as a academic coming out of a PhD?
First and foremost, just the skill set of being exposed to a large-scale review of the literature has been invaluable. Being able to take this large body of literature, sort through it, extract the relevant information with a number of other team members, and presenting that to community members in a simple and easy to understand manner. So those skills are invaluable. But secondly, this emphasis on collaboration with the community members. So we want to produce research that's relevant. We get into research because we want to make change. And as Vicki mentioned earlier, we have ideas, we identify gaps in the literature, but are they important and are they meaningful? So, and the only way to really create meaningful research is to involve the community and let them guide our projects.
So can you think of some of the challenges you might have in having some of these recommendations be taken up?
Yeah, I think in many ways, sometimes it's challenging to connect with community partners. There's, as Audrey mentioned, there may be a lack of trust because researchers haven't had the best intentions in history. So I think first and foremost, it's building the relationship. And the biggest challenge is time in research. As a PhD student, I have 4 years to get this done, and 1 year's gone because I was doing my courses. So we've got 3 years, right, to try and develop some partnerships and relationships. So the biggest thing is building trust and those really strong relationships with community partners.
There's always this challenge between time limitations as a doctoral student, but also how the time needed to develop partnerships to get those meaningful results, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Vicki, where else could we learn more about the projects? Often our viewers want to know where they can find out extra.
Yeah, so our website is a great spot. We have both an Epi.Work website where all of our members are listed, and we are in the process, once our knowledge mobilization and implementation group is put together, we hope to be completely overhauling that website so that what people want to find, they can find it a bit easier. But we have some projects listed there. Our hope is that we will be putting findings from research projects on there as well. We also have a LinkedIn site that is very active. We have quite a few followers, so keeping that up to date. And as our knowledge mobilization and implementation division grows, we also host EPID talks. So we have public talks at least 4 times a year, but we're hoping that grows into a larger talk session. And once those people are in place, who knows what else they'll come up with. The idea is that they're going to be the experts in knowledge mobilization, and they will help to get the information out. So we hope to be much more active in community so that people will get to see us and see us out there as we grow.
And people can find about the EPID talks on the website?
That's on the website, both the website and our LinkedIn site, and we post everything through Lakehead University as well. So if people watch the communication bulletins, for example, they can find them there.
Okay. So as we kind of mentioned at the beginning of this interview, you certainly wear many hats, Vicki, and I know the amount of time you put into all these projects is incredible. What is it that drives you to challenge yourself in this way?
I love research. I think for me, the challenge has always been, as an epidemiologist, is to conduct a study, try to conduct the best studies that I possibly can that limit as much bias as possible. I know we can never have a study that has no bias in it, but for me, it's the methods of research I find really exciting, but also the fact that they can have a huge impact, that we can determine things that we can then identify areas for change. And I think that's one of the most exciting things, is that research, when it's conducted really well, can be a leverage into change. And I think that's really what drives me. In terms of all of the different hats, I think the things I'm doing excite me. So I love doing it. And if it can help people, that's great.
That's great to hear. I mean, I do believe research excites and research matters. You know, this is an example of projects where there is tangible results that are coming out that people can say, yeah, it's going to make a difference. You know, the answer's there. So thank you, Kara and Vicki. Thank you for sharing your interesting and topical research work. The importance of relationship building and maintaining its community-based Indigenous research work is integral. Engaging with them at the inception is critical. We've seen that in these projects here. There's a need to acknowledge and respect Indigenous worldviews, integrate them into the research process. Thank you for providing those insights again, both of you. And viewers, on that note, I invite you to watch the past editions of Research Matters on LU's YouTube page. We're happy to hear from you. Please share your research interests, comments, and views. And on that optimistic note on how research matters to all of us, I'm Andrew Dean, VP of Research at Lakehead University, wishing you all the best today.